I went and did something fancy this weekend. I put on my special trousers, and my wife put on the lipstick, and we got in the truck, and we drove to a community theater production. Now, I've been to community theater productions in the past that, you know what? It looked like everybody had a lot of fun, and they tried their best, and it's okay if it wasn't perfect, because that's not the point. I've been to other community theater productions in the past that were really pretty good, but this one exceeded all of my expectations. It was so stinking good. The cast was great, top to bottom. The directing was good. The script was good. More on that in a minute. And the vocal performances were great. It was a musical, and everybody absolutely nailed it, and it was difficult. And so I just had a blast. I was enraptured. I was laughing the whole time, not courtesy laughs, but like, this is legitimately funny. I'm in. I want to see how this plays out. Massive props to everybody who was a part of that thing. But the story structure that I wanted to come back to on this one was the old, "Hey, that's me" opening. I'm guessing you're wondering how I got here. And then the whole story is a flashback anticipating one decisive moment at the end. And I kind of like that storytelling structure because you know you're going to get that crystal clear payoff about what happened. And in the case of this particular story, which I think was called A Gentleman's Guide to Murder, the payoff was really good. It was very, very fun. Well, likewise, we've been in and out of flashback for a couple of chapters in the book of Ezra. Ezra starts off very promisingly under the reign of Cyrus the Great of Persia. There's a new king. There's a new vibe in town, but there's resistance, and that resistance grinds the work of rebuilding the temple to a halt, and years go by, and by the time we get into the, I guess we should really call it the flash forward sections in Ezra chapters 4, 5, and 6, we're back to a place of having great tension. How is this thing going to work out? What is the verdict going to be? Will the temple ever get finished? Will the presence of God return to dwell among his people in the way they expected in the past? How's it going to go? And now the whole thing is brilliantly set up by this author to bring us to a place of saying there's going to be a verdict. It's all going to come down to the highest court in the land, which at this point is one guy, King Darius, this newly crowned king who fought bloody battles and who made aggressive moves to capture this throne. What's he going to do with this tension? How will he rule? Remember, King Darius just got a letter from Tatanai, the guy who is the chief administrator of Trans-Euphrates, where Jerusalem is. And he's like, here's everything everybody said. I don't know if we should be doing this, let alone funding it. But they say an order was issued by Cyrus. I defer to you on this one, Darius. Well, the first question is, will Darius even look at the letter? And will he even do what Tatanai suggested, which is to go and make a search to figure out whether or not Cyrus did indeed say that? And here's what we find out in Ezra 6, starting in verse 1. King Darius then issued an order, and they searched in the archives stored in the treasury at Babylon. Well, this is great news. He saw it. It came across his desk. And not only that, but he's like, oh, let's go ahead and look it up. But now we got another tension point, and that is, well, are they going to find it? I mean, it's been a long time. We had some violent turnover in the monarchy here. There's maybe even some regicide going on. Will that fateful little piece of parchment or paper and scribing still be around? Verse 2, a scroll was found in the citadel of Ecbatana in the province of Media, and this was written on it. Before we get to what was written on it, it wasn't found in Babylon. It was found in Ecbatana. You remember that town? That's where Astyages is from, the old king of the Medes, the grandfather of Cyrus the Great. That's where Harpagus' fateful banquet occurred. It's a town that sits up in the high country. It's sort of Denver-esque, or more like if you go west of Denver, up into Evergreen or Golden. It sits at about 6,000 feet. We know that many of the kings of Persia like to go up there to spend their summers because it was so pleasant. And I don't know how it got there, but a copy of this edict was found up there. Now, that tells us something about how seriously Darius was taking this request to figure out what his predecessor had said. I think a lot of kings, I think a lot of not kings, I think a lot of office administrators or people who just are hustling and running their own business wouldn't even answer this email, let alone go and do a thorough search of the whole office to figure out whether or not this is actually something you're obligated to, let alone go and search some old office space where there might still be some old documents sitting around to figure out if this edict had been issued. Yet Darius, under that pressure we talked about before, does believe he needs to do this, and he sees it through, and he looks pretty good for seeing it through, and he discovers that these people who are rebuilding this temple were telling the truth, and this is what follows. Memorandum. In the first year of King Cyrus, the king issued a decree concerning the temple of God in Jerusalem. Here's the payoff. Let the temple be rebuilt as a place to present sacrifices, and let its foundations be laid. It is to be 90 feet high and 90 feet wide, with 3 courses of large stones and 1 of timbers. The costs are to be paid by the royal treasury. Also, the gold and silver articles of the house of God, which Nebuchadnezzar took from the temple in Jerusalem and brought to Babylon, are to be returned to their places in the temple in Jerusalem. They are to be deposited in the house of God. Now then, Tattenai, governor of Trans-Euphrates, and Shethar-Bozenai, and you, their fellow officials of that province, stay away from there. Do not interfere with the work on this temple of God. Let the governor of the Jews and the Jewish elders rebuild this house of God on its site. I'm going to keep reading because this is an important letter. Moreover, Darius continues, I hereby decree what you are to do for those elders of the Jews in the construction of this house of God. The expenses of these men are to be fully paid out of the royal treasury from the revenues of Trans-Euphrates, so that the work will not stop. Whatever is needed, young bulls, rams, male lambs for burnt offerings to the God of heaven, and wheat, salt, wine, and oil as requested by the priests in Jerusalem, must be given to them daily without fail, so that they may offer sacrifices pleasing to the God of heaven and pray for the well-being of the king and his sons. And there's one more little nugget here at the end that we're going to get to in just a minute. But as you can see, this is a full-throated, not only echoing of, but expansion of the instructions of Cyrus. I would submit to you, my friends, that Darius does not feel the pressure to do this if it weren't for how he obtained power. That little historical incident that we talked about a while back that Darius carved into that mountainside, it is clearly coming into play here. Darius is not just extending Cyrus's policy toward the Jews, he's seizing on this as an opportunity to extend on Cyrus's policy toward all enslaved and conquered people groups, and he's extending on Cyrus's policy of hedging his bets with these deities. Let's just have all these people pray to all of their deities for the king. Offer sacrifices to your God and prayers to your God on behalf of Darius. Please, I'll take it. And for those of you who listen, who, like me, think there is a God behind all of this, who would say, I'm a Christian, I'm a follower of God in whatever way, I never find it off-putting when somebody who doesn't believe there's a God is like, you know what, I'll take it, pray for me. Cool. I don't need you to believe all of my things. I'm honored to go to a God I believe exists, and a God who I believe cares about things, and a God who I believe cares very much about people who believe in him and people who don't, and offer prayers on your behalf. Of course I will do that. I don't think it's weird or cheap at all that Darius has clearly a very limited understanding of the theology of the God of Abraham and how all of this works, and still wants them to pray for him to this God. So what? We'll take it. It's a win. That's huge. That's awesome. If you sit around and wait for everybody who doesn't believe in God or think all of the right things to think all of the right things before you find common cause or even common points in the journey of faith with them, you're going to be waiting for a really long time. I say celebrate stuff like this, and I think this is a great moment and a great look for Darius and a great look for the Jewish leadership, who tacitly at least seemed to have been up for that. Yeah, heck yeah, we'll pray for the king. Now, the last little nugget in this letter and the last few things we want to highlight from the book of Ezra before we move on out of here are all things that pertain to and in some obvious ways and in some very subtle ways set up the story of Esther. After that, we'll dip a quick toe into the book of Nehemiah just to see how the whole Persian and rebuilding part of the story rounds out. And then we should be set up and ready to go on the whole Esther deal, which is what it is time for 2 reasons. One, because we just about have the stage set, all the historical background stuff and the other biblical background stuff that I wanted to get to. And two, because I knew at some point I would hear from someone who was like, hey, I'm kind of speaking on behalf of all of us. If we could just get onto that book of the Bible that's in the title of these episodes, it'd be great because I really want to talk about Esther. And Melissa, who commented in the subreddit, asking when it is that we might get into the book of Esther and get out of the historical context. I have heard you, and we are on our way. Final note. A couple days ago, I was like, hey, Jeff, the Monday episode this week, it's going to have this Appalachian-sounding folk song from the Civil War soundtrack. If you could just take a minute or two over the weekend and redo that sucker so it kind of sounds like the soaring Top Gun anthem, I would really like that. And Jeff, rather than being like, what? That's insane. That can't be done by human hands. You've lost your mind. Instead was like, okay. And then that just happened. So if you didn't stay all the way to the end yesterday, you probably ought to go and catch that. Also, I'm going to have Jeff give me that file. I'm going to share it with all of you who are patrons so that you can use it as a ringtone because I think it was that rad. Thank you, Jeffrey. Thank you, all of you as well. Thank you, Melissa, for nudging me onward. That is just fine and even appreciated. I'm Matt. This is the 10 Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.